Hurricane Ernesto arrives in Newfoundland on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for August 20th. So a few storms around the hot spot right now, but we also have Tropical Storm Jongdari moving through the East China Sea and Tropical Storm Gilma out in the Eastern Pacific. We also briefly designated that Southwest Indian Ocean system as a tropical depression, but right now it's looking very poor and we've put it back to a remnant low. It's day 81 of the Atlantic hurricane season and Ernesto is out on its own, moving through or very close to Newfoundland this evening. Still baffling to me why there aren't any warnings out there. There really should be. In the Eastern Pacific, we've got Gilma, which is a tropical storm and strengthening at least 50 miles per hour, 60 according to the National Hurricane Center, moving west-northwest, likely to become a hurricane. A few other areas of interest there, including an 80% chance near the Central Pacific and a 40% chance further east, but it doesn't look like we'll get Hone. It looks like that system will form before it reaches that 140-degree line. Jong Dari moving north through the East China Sea there, not too far from Jeju, South Korea. What's left of Ampil is really pushing up through the Aleutian Islands, still a powerful extratropical low, and a 40% chance for a system that could develop near the Mariana Islands. North Indian Ocean is quiet, missing out on the activity right now, although that is pretty much expected. This time of year can be very quiet, but there is a lot of general thunderstorms along the western coast of India there. And then we've got the remnants of this tropical depression in the southwest Indian Ocean. The convection completely died away. It's not looking so good right now. Still could be an outside chance that it does come back, but the chances at this point are pretty low. Let's check in with Jong Dari then. We're currently giving it 45 mile per hour winds and a pressure of 998 millibars. A gale advisory in effect for some of the Japanese islands. No warnings just yet for South Korea, but it will happen pretty soon, I'm sure. 243 kilometers from Jeju, that island on the south. 430 kilometers from Kagoshima, Japan. 437 from Shanghai, China. 464 from Gwangju on the mainland of South Korea, and 729 from the capital Seoul. The storm is moving north-northwest at this time and is likely to graze the western coast of Korea. Here's Ernesto, which is currently 273 kilometers from St. Shots, one of the most southerly points of Newfoundland, 291 from Tripassi, 296 from St. Lawrence further west, 392 from St. John's, the major city there, and 2004 kilometers from Flores on the Azores, way out towards the east. The storm will be heading out over the North Atlantic, still with 85 mile per hour winds right now, according to our latest estimate, and a pressure estimate of 971. Here's Ernesto on satellite imagery. It looks like extratropical transition has begun, although it won't complete for a little while yet. The eye, which was holding on for a good period of time, has collapsed, and now it looks like there's a dry air slot on that eastern side. So the storm is starting to struggle, but it is still pushing very strong winds. Here's a super close-up on the eastern tip of Newfoundland there, with cloudiness increasing this evening and storm force winds expected to arrive fairly soon. An 87% chance of tropical storm force winds on the coast of Newfoundland, and somehow no warnings issued, which I find to be quite astounding. Well, there it is, moving east-northeasterly at this time. It will continue over the North Atlantic. It will weaken gradually and turn post-tropical, and by the time it gets to Europe, it will be a weak extratropical low, still potentially though with winds of up to 45 miles per hour. Though at this time, there it is, slowly decaying as it continues northeasterly, turning east-northeasterly. In a moment we'll also be able to take a look at radar. Here it is, still looking quite fearsome actually when you look at this. Some red zones there on that Canadian radar site, so it really looks like there's going to be some significant bands really smashing the coast there over the next few hours. Now here's a close-up of Jong Dari, a very interesting storm. It's really loaded up on the western and southern side with massive amounts of convection, huge plume there extending over mostly sea areas there. You'll be able to see it from Shanghai probably, and on the eastern side it's pretty quiet as a result. That's the product of high wind shear, no doubt, but still there will be some significant winds even on that eastern side. That's why we've got gale advisories for large parts of the coast of Japan. But look at the cloud tops there, very powerful indeed, into the -80s at times, and just the area coverage of that as well, quite impressive there from Jong Dari. At least 45-mile-per-hour winds, could have an outside chance of getting to 50 briefly, but it is expected to weaken quite quickly fairly soon. There it is on radar as well, caught between quite a few radar sites. The north and east sides really bare, and then you have the sudden shock of the storm when you get to the center. Now this is what's left of Ampil, just a quick look there as it moves through Attu Island, I think that is, in Alaska, and continuing northeasterly. And this is Gilma, still struggling with wind shear as well, this storm, obviously loaded very much on that southern side and towards the southwest as well, but it is slowly intensifying. Here's some infrared imagery of it. They had a good burst earlier today, it's just starting to fade away there, so we'll have to wait and see whether we get a new burst which will no doubt sustain its strengthening phase. Here's the other inverse, that's the 80% chance that we've got right now, still moving west at the moment, which edges it ever closer to the Central Pacific line. Eastern Pacific and Central Pacific have different naming lists, and of course has been well publicized. We've been waiting for the next Central Pacific name, Hone, for nearly 5 years, and it's become a running joke. Here's the other area of interest near the Daito Islands of Japan. This is the Western Pacific, that little system that may or may not develop. We haven't tagged it. And this is the Southwest Indian Ocean system, known as 90S, but we designated it briefly as a tropical depression earlier. It started to come apart again in those latest frames, so we've dropped it down to a remnant low. We'll have to wait and see whether it rallies back again. It's going to be a lower chance this time. Well, here's the look from the US East Coast. Ernesto just moving off to the picture there, exiting stage right. And this is the Caribbean region. Lots of dry air mass still in the eastern part there. Tons of Saharan dust actually over the area. A few little storms out in the western Caribbean. Off the coast of Africa, not too much going on, but an enormous wave there moving through Central Africa, and it will eventually move off the coast in about a day's time. In the Eastern Pacific, still tons of just general storms there, convection all over there, a big line really of storms extending from that other area of interest, the easternmost one, moving eastwards. Eventually something should come out of that. There's Gilma in the middle, the other system on the left hand side, maybe another one in there somewhere as well, very confusing. And this is the Western Pacific. The system we've tagged for the 40% chance is the one on the right there. That system could end up developing near the Mariana Islands, already looking quite decent actually, if I may say so. And this is the North Indian Ocean, still a plume of storms near Bangladesh and India and Myanmar. And this is the Southwest Indian Ocean. You can again see that system there, which looked quite decent for a time, but it certainly has decreased phenomenally in convection in the last few hours. What a ride that was. The Eastern Pacific then, still with very high sea surface temperatures off the coast of Mexico, extending through the Gulf of California, up to 30 degrees, up to towards 32 actually in a couple of spots off the coast. The Gulf of Mexico also extremely warm off Louisiana, 32 degrees still, and the Gulf Stream still warming up there, firing up off the east coast of Florida. Big cool patch there near Bermuda. No surprise as to what caused that. It was Ernesto. Western Pacific, obviously Jong Dari throwing up tons of convection because it can. Look at those sea surface temperatures, near 32 degrees Celsius in a large pool there in the East China Sea, also near the Ryukyu Islands. North Indian Ocean looking good as well off the east coast of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh in India, up towards 30 to 31 degrees Celsius. Impressive. Sea surface temperatures still looking pretty, anomalies I should say, very much above average in large parts of the Atlantic Ocean. A big plume of lower temperatures caused by Ernesto. You can also see Ampel's trail there in the Western Pacific, but overall all of the basins are performing above average. Eastern Pacific looking decent too. Western Pacific, huge anomalies further north around the Korean Peninsula, Japan, and further east up to 5 degrees above average, also near Newfoundland too. Now the Western Pacific, high amounts of oceanic heat content, moderate actually where Jong Dari is currently, but the Philippine Sea still taking all of that energy, huge amounts. Eastern Pacific, a few little spots here and there as well where those current systems are, so keep watching, there could be a little bit of a flurry going on there. Western Atlantic, still extremely high values across most of the Caribbean, through the Bahamas, all around Cuba, and into a few parts of the Gulf of Mexico as well. Gulf Stream also looking fairly strong. Atlantic Ocean is still well and truly open for business. We're just waiting for some more storms. Although they're not appearing on the computer models, GFS not really showing anything out through the 16-day period. There's Ernesto going off towards the east, crossing the Atlantic. We'll get a close-up now on the Newfoundland area, and you can see just how close it gets on the GFS model. Still, I can't quite believe why they haven't issued warnings there, but tropical storm force winds affecting that area quite clearly, moving on to the British Isles and then towards northern Europe. Eventually moving through Scandinavia with still storm force winds, but obviously not tropical. Eastern Pacific, these systems developing. The one on the left hand side, that was the 80% chance, looks like it wraps up and develops into a storm before it reaches the Central Pacific, but it does move on to become a Central Pacific threat. The Hawaiian Islands in its sights there, becoming a hurricane, a substantial one. Gilma doing the same, becoming quite a larger system actually. The other system is in between the two, trying to develop, looks like it fails, and then the one forming to the east there later on, 40% chance of a tropical storm on that. Western Pacific, you can quickly see Jong Dari moving through the Korean Peninsula at the end there. Actually makes landfall in North Korea as a tropical, well, not tropical storm, but storm force winds, probably post-tropical by then. And then this next system forming near the Mariana Islands, GFS has toned it down. Yesterday it was calling for it to become a strong typhoon approaching the Ryukyu Islands and Kyushu in Japan. Now it's calling for it to be a fairly mundane tropical storm moving northwards towards the Ogasawara Islands. Looking at rainfall expectations for the next 7 days in this region, there's a few hot spots there and obviously a big area where this potential storm is. Looks like it stalls for a little while near the Mariana Islands and then it continues northwards. It does actually stall out a little bit further west than previous model runs, so the islands around that area aren't affected quite as much, but we're looking at maximums there of 7 inches, 150 to 200 millimeters, but offshore potentially getting up to 600 millimeters. Parts of Japan and Korea there getting up towards 7 inches there as well, that's over 150 millimeters, and some heavy rainfall in China there as well. In the longer range, day 5 to 10, 3 hurricanes all in a row there at the same time. That 80% chance, Gilma in the middle, and that third system, that 40% out east. Watching that Hawaiian threat there, it's a close one, not as close as it was in yesterday's update. As a matter of fact, most of the islands just about get away with it, and then Gilma is on its way as well, but it's weakening their tropical depression by the end of that run. And this is the Western Pacific system. There it is, moving up towards the Tokyo area again, Chiba, and then moving on northeastwards. That's a tropical storm landfall there. So whether that happens or not remains to be seen. Obviously a threat of a kind, but certainly nothing like what Ampel threatened to do last week. But there it is, moving off into a frontal low by the later part of that run. That's all the serious stuff done with. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force the Team merch store, where you can take a look at all of our items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request at any time. And our Still Waiting for Hode t-shirt still available. That's the next storm on that Central Pacific naming list. We've been waiting for it for so long. Will it be that 80% chance? In the Scilly Range then, those three systems all dying off together actually there in the Pacific. The one on the left hand side looks like it holds out the longest there. A little interaction between Gilma and that system, and then it's a quiet east pack. Quickly looking towards the Atlantic, there is a little system that tries to develop there, harking back to Alberto and Chris again, I feel. It looks like it's that kind of year. Into the Bay of Campeche, a system trying to develop right at the end of that run, but of course it is a very long way out. Well, on this day it was a relatively busy tropics. Back in 1981, the main system of threat was Typhoon Thad, which was heading towards Japan. A very broad and big typhoon. Category 1 status though, high-end Cat 1. Warren made landfall in China, was a tropical storm in Vietnam, moving inland. What was left of Vanessa was not too far from where Ampel is. Dennis was strengthening. It would become a hurricane by the end of the day near the Outer Banks of North Carolina. 11L dying off as it approached the Caribbean, and Hurricane Greg entering the Central Pacific. So a busy day that one was as well. Meanwhile, back to today in the Atlantic, our next name is Francine. In the Eastern Pacific, it could be happening soon. Hector is next up. And in the Central Pacific, of course, we're still waiting for Hone. In the Western Pacific, the next name now is Shanshan, and in the North Indian Ocean, it is still Asna. 39 storms so far this year around the world, still a little bit underperforming, but certainly has caught up a lot in the last couple of weeks. Australian region, the next name is Robin in the Southern Hemisphere. The Southwest Indian Ocean, it should have been or could have been Ansha from that system that we've just had, didn't quite happen. And in the South Pacific, it's Pitta. That's it from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow. Become an ultimate fan today.